Now, after the EU Commission unveiled the outcomes which took place during the votes which were being cast by countries on whether they increased tariffs on EV stocks like Nio or Chinese EV makers, so some of the companies and countries have came out after that conclusion or after that report, which indicated that majority of the votes were indeed agreeing that the EU Commission should increase tariff to the Chinese EV makers like Nio, which was not good. I mean, if you remember well, there are countries that abstained to vote. There are 5 countries, including Germany, that vote against the notion of increasing tariff onto Chinese EV makers. But of course, the majority of the countries were voted in favor of the decision of increasing tariff onto Chinese EV makers. Now, like I said, after that, there are companies, there are countries that still stand or that still advises or is still issuing statements to the EU Commission to say that let them find a solid ground with China because they don't want to create trade wars. I mean, just today I read an article also coming from BMW still stating the same thing, that there must be something that the EU Commission can do. They must strive to strike a deal with China and not just aggressively increase these tariffs onto Chinese EV makers like Nio, because it will backfire and will cause unnecessary trade wars, which, knowing that companies or car companies or EU car companies are coming to say this, they realize the hurt that this will bring, not just to, of course, the Chinese EV makers, who by the way are not selling that much in Europe, but it will also bring harm to them, which is why we are seeing quite a number of countries, some of course companies coming out and say that please find a solid ground with China. I mean, over and above this, we also got a subsidiary company to VW who also came and said they are pleading with EU Commission to find a solid ground with China so that at least they can resolve these tariff issues, or this tariff which according to them they want to impose onto Chinese EV makers like Nio. So it is good to see companies like BMW taking a very strong position onto this matter of saying that they disagree, they don't want, they think there's something that can be done for this not to be as aggressive as the EU Commission wants to implement. And this, I think, it is good news to investors. This is good news to companies like Nio, because in as much as yes, there were votes which were casted last week, and it shows that majority of the countries are staying or are supporting with the notion of increasing tariffs onto Chinese EV makers. There are still countries and companies that are fighting for Chinese EV makers like Nio to say that they need to find a solid ground. They believe that the talks can still take place. They still got things, they can still find a solid ground, which is what even the executive of the EU Commission did say, that they're still open to talks. They're still going to engage with China when it comes to this tariff increase, which is something that gives us hope to say that things will get better with time. I mean, the video I made earlier today, we're talking about the strategy that Nio might be having in mind of penetrating the US market, which, by the way, they've imposed 100% tariff increase onto Chinese EVs. I mean, the Biden administration, they increased 100% or put additional 100% tariffs onto Chinese EV makers, which shows you that they don't want them in that market. But thank God for a partnership that Nio signed over the weekend with UAE, which will allow them to be able to, or which might allow them to be able to sell their cars in the US via Abu Dhabi, because the part of the plan which got unfolded during that partnership is that Nio is going to end up building a factory in Abu Dhabi, which that factory, I personally think, not only will it cater for the UAE, but chances it might also be the one that caters for the US market, because all the cars that comes from Abu Dhabi into the US, they are paying tariffs of 12.5. We've discussed more about that, which is something that is pretty exciting. So this tariff, it is one thing that is leading into that might lead into trade wars, which I don't think we want that, because it hurts everyone, especially those that are benefiting, selling their cars, selling their products in China. I mean, when you look into the fast growing EV industry, companies like Nio, which is our favorite stock, they are not benefiting much from Europe. They are still not selling that much from Europe, which therefore these tariffs won't be much of an impact to EV stocks like Nio, because 98% of their sales they're generating it in China, which is something that of course shows us that even if things don't go that well at the end of the day of the tariffs, Nio will still do well. But of course, for growth, they need the European market, they need the US market, they need the UAE market, which is why they've been trying to penetrate, and they've been successful penetrating the Europe market. Though Europe wants to make it difficult now by increasing these tariffs, they have successfully penetrated the European market. US market, it's still difficult for Nio to penetrate, which, yeah, it's not good. But hopefully with this new partnership of Nio and the UAE, it will be easier via Abu Dhabi for Nio to maybe start selling or shipping their cars into the US. So I'm happy, I'm excited. Tell me what you think about this. I think these are brilliant news. These are good news to know that companies are fighting for EV stocks like Nio. Companies, European companies are fighting, and countries saying that the EU Commission should find a solid ground and not bring trade wars to Europe, because they realize the damage that it can do to the European companies also, which is something that I think they need to have that at the back of their mind. I know that there are countries that just want the tariff to be imposed or to be implemented as soon as possible onto China, but I must tell you, when China retaliates, it won't be good for these EU countries, because they've got more to lose than China, which is something I think that sometimes they tend to forget that, or they tend to, I don't know what's happening, but I think it might hurt them more, because like I said, China EVs, I'll make Nio for instance, it's just selling 300 on a month to month, 300 400 units in Europe, which you and me can agree that right now Nio can live without those sales in Europe, right? But obviously we want them, because Nio in the long term, they want to build their presence, which is something that we look forward to, and I think it will be important for Nio to continue penetrating the European market. So yeah, man, these are the latest updates. Tell me what you think about this. I'm happy for BM Spain and this sub-brand for Volkswagen's coming and stand for Chinese EV makers like Nio, to say that EU Commission still needs to reconsider and be in talks, engage with China to find a solid ground. Otherwise, that's all from me. I just thought I'd just give you this quick update, and God bless you all.